Alright, how's everybody doing? So here we are at Memorial Day. This could be a big day, right? I also wanted to consider a couple other things. And I keep talking about the fourth watch because we're in that fourth window. But, there could also, and I've said this for a long time too, sometimes they give us the answers. Now, the only reason I'm watching this, this is from a couple days ago, back when I did that video talking about the wedding. He will not be attending. We already know this, but I even mentioned in there without having seen this, right? The quote from the Bible, "For he so loved the world," right? For he loved the United States. I've also mentioned in a video before that it shows up in the music. So we have that song, "The Fall of the Peacekeepers." I mentioned that song years ago. It's the same thing as the fall of man. And Donald Trump has been quoted as saying he loves the peacekeepers. So this is nothing new. There's also, I'm just covering a couple things here real quick because there's only one more thing to add, really. So in a video recently, I was talking about the Peloponnesian War and how in that particular time frame, it was the Persians helping the Peloponnesians, and here it's just the opposite. So I think going back to making the turn, I think that's another indicator that we made that turn, that those events are backwards from each other, mirror, mirror. So the only other thing I've got to add to this, so I do think, like I said, that dome that was given to Jesus ended there. Because there was another shooting at the White House, just like there was a shooting, if you go back to about the 11th, when we cleared the hopscotch board, there was another shooting at the White House then, too. And that goes back to, what they tell us in Men in Black 3, where there's death, there will always be death. It just may not occur the way it happened in the original timeline. So the other interesting thing, so if we look at one of the things that they told us, right, the doomsday clock is now at and I probably should have checked this, didn't they set it to 85 seconds before midnight? I probably should have checked that but in a video I did a long time ago, a couple years back, I talked about the doomsday clock being set before midnight, because in the story of Cinderella, the carriage turns into a pumpkin at midnight, right? That's the end of the story. So that could have something to do with it too. Also did some looking around. Okay, so another big date. So we have today being the 25th. That would be the 5th day. If I'm not mistaken, the 6th day would have been the 26th, unless we count the 20th. So today would be the 6th day if we count that 20th, right? And the only reason I'm bringing this up is I've talked about the great 8th day. So before I mentioned, we had a particular, what we would refer to as a timeline. It was just when we got here, one thing leads to another. In eternity, you don't count time, right? Time was added in here as timestamps for the picture show, right? So the whole reason I'm bringing this up is, I do believe the timeline ran out, the dome for Jesus, so we still could go tonight. But one thing leads to another, right? So we were all in what we would call the present, current time, whatever you want to deal with it right here when everything switched. So that 8th day, like I've said before, may encompass this so that we fill back into here instead of just dropping in here. You see what I'm saying? I'm not real sure. The other thing that's funny about this date on the 27th is because the moon is going to be at 88% illumination. We're heading towards that next full moon. And this gets back to, okay, the earth, and we have the dark side, right? And we have the lit side, which has to do with the dead in Christ rising first, and then the others will be transformed. It all happens at the same time. It's just a split second apart, right? It's not like one's going one day and one's going the next. It just has to do with the position of the daylight hours, okay? And so at midnight, you know, at 85 seconds before midnight, we will be in the dark, right? I just don't know. Oh, and the reason this is important, the 88%, like I said, this is a mixture of heaven and hell, right? So, you know, you've heard all along you can't have one without the other, and, you know, it takes the light to shine on the dark, and it is what it is. You know, we have an old expression, it's called the 80-20 rule. Okay, that 20% affects the 80. This right here would only leave 12% darkness coming into the new world. Instead of, you know, a lot of people talk about the equal parts of day and night, okay? We did that, right? That was back at the birth of the twins. That was equal parts day and night. But we're not bringing that much darkness with us. Okay? I think that's significant. It'll happen on the 27th, which will become that great 8th day to put us back out here. So I'm still looking at tonight, but it could go as far as this day right here, the 27th, which is just 2 more days. So again, not real sure. I just, you know, I see the things that I see, only because, like I said, I live at the moment. I don't, you know, I understand fully that tomorrow's promised to nobody. So I don't keep kicking the can down the road. I just look at what potentially could happen based on the timeline I'm watching. And, you know, so we've already made the flip, apparently. That was shown to us. I think we could be waiting for this. You know, that comes out of that Back to the Future movie. Now, unfortunately, some movies you have to pay for to watch, and I ain't doing all that. So I'm trying to run through clips because I'm looking for stuff like this in some of the movies I've watched as well. But that's only when I have time. I don't really have a lot of time, so it is what it is. So like I said, welcome to the beginning of the timeline, the 25th, Memorial Day. But we could be heading towards that great 8th day. Time will tell, right? We're still in a pause. Everybody's seeing. I think that's part of the last Trump, too. Because the way it's working right now, everybody's, you know, picking on the whole thing, right? Well, Trump says there's peace, and then Iran says there's not. You've got the two different sides. I think that's where the last Trump, so to speak, comes in. We'll have that last bit of daylight where they may say peace and safety and there's a deal done before we can get to the night for them to counteract it. I'm not sure. It's all just crazy town, right? So anyway, God, this is already approaching 10 minutes. Time flies. I didn't even want it to get this long. So welcome to the 25th. We're right here. And I've even been hearing people talk about just how different they have felt this weekend, how things seem to have shifted. That's why we're closing in right here. Not only did we clear the hopscotch board, there was a big shift going on there. A lot of people actually reporting lots of new Mandela effects. Every time this happens, we get them. So, like I said, this is my. I can't see past these. Now we could, we could. Anything's possible, right? But just the things I see today's still huge. I don't even count on getting out of today, but if we do, we could be going. And what's ironic about this date here, that would put us back into the midweek, right? That middle candlestick of the week. So I don't know. A lot of stuff pointing to right here too. Everything from the light in the moon to getting back out to here, the 8th day. I don't know. So hang in there. And I love you all, and just keep laughing at it all. Laughter's the best medicine for all this. Love you all. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.